I find a lot of the people who are called to this journey have these big challenges perhaps earlier on in life. There's, as you mentioned, I think not belonging is a big one. I mean, I can certainly relate to that. It kind of grew stronger in my teens, I must say. As a kid, I didn't have it so much. Me being different was okay. I could read superhero comics and go and watch my Doctor Who, whatever, but that was fine. And I could play games with my friends. It was fine to have a big imagination. But as a teenager, I felt that was becoming more of a, well, am I slightly weird or something? And this sense of not belonging grew. I was a round peg in a square hole, as I mentioned. So I felt a great sense of disempowerment, like you've said. Certainly in my teenage years and early adult years, I had that feeling of not on track. And I used to read all these sci-fi books or fantasy books about heroes who were on track and having these magical adventures, and somehow was comparing myself. There are people having amazing lives. Why am I having this very ordinary, very boring, very stressful life? And somewhere along the line, I kind of had a feeling somewhere that maybe there was something more for me, but I kind of dismissed it as fantasy. I'm just fantasizing. It's never going to be for me. But what I found is the journey, as you mentioned, is whatever the challenge is of I don't belong, points to the opposite of community. I found great communities. I'm still finding great communities now of people who are more in line with my values, my interests, my outlook. I felt I had no voice, and now I feel I have a very strong voice. I've got these 91,000 people on YouTube following me, and on Facebook I think there's about 60,000 on a few pages and 10,000 on Instagram. And suddenly I've got a voice and people are interested. Or for some people it might be experiences around the heart or love or betrayal, and then of course the opposite of that is finding love. Or it might be feeling trapped, to finding freedom and liberation. So whatever the challenge, it actually points to the journey. So if someone feels trapped, the journey of the hero's journey is going to be one of liberation and expansion and freedom for them. It's going to be a breaking out of what the challenge is and finding the gold in that. I think part of the journey is also one of value. It's a values-led life, which is a very coaching way of looking at it, I think. But when I look back on my life, when I was working in the corporate world, I had no idea what values meant. It's like an inner compass, isn't it? What's really important for me? When I eventually heard the term values, and I heard someone say it, well, what's that? And then I found out, and I did a little process on it. I found my values are creativity, learning, spirituality, and community. And when I looked at that old job I was doing, it didn't tick any of the boxes, actually, not one. and the next job I did, being a director of alternatives, it ticked all of them, which is why it's very hard for me to leave. But now it's ticking all those boxes in a different way, perhaps a more intense way. Where we come from these challenges also leads to activating our inner potential, which is a vague term. Because if you say, well, we've all got inner potential, well, what is it? Well, I've got no idea. Part of the journey of going through all this calling, refusal, and then the whole process that the journey does, which is brings you challenges, and there's kind of allies who comes in, and all of this, and people probably know the journey, the template of the journey. That something vague within us starts to activate. So we may have the analogy, one person might have a seeds of an apple tree, and another person seeds of a pear tree, another person a plum tree, and so it's only when it activates. My journey is apple, and these are the gifts I've come to share. My journey is plum, or my journey is pear, So when I was working in the corporate world, I had no idea that I could write books. I was reading lots of books. I had no idea I could write any. This was something just seed form within me. I had no idea I could write blogs. There was no such thing as a blog even then, I don't think. I had no idea I could run events. I had no idea I could be a director of a spiritual organization. I didn't know I could run webinars. There was no such thing as webinars. I think coaching was very, very new when I was working in the corporate world. There was no such thing as a YouTube channel or podcasting channels. So I had no idea any of this was possible. One of the things for me, creativity was so important, and I did explore it conventionally in many ways. I did jewelry courses and stained glass courses and creative writing courses, and none of it did anything for me. I was like, yes, but it's not quite. So it's only when I went on the journey and it suddenly exploded, all this kind of explosion of creativity happened. And I realized, I actually am a creative person. And so we ignite this creativity. And I think one of the things, I know we talked about it before the podcast, is we become a resource point for our descendants. We're a gift for the bloodline. I think there's a kind of healing that goes on in our bloodlines, So when I look at my father and his work, he was totally unhappy in his work. He used to come home from his job. He wouldn't say much about his work, but I could tell by his body language and way he spoke, work is not great. And so I had this idea, work is not great. It's kind of almost like a squashing, or he felt like trapped or unhappy, or I have to do this. This is something I have to do for the family. And so now I think what I've been doing is transforming this in the bloodline. You see, gift is to my children and grandchildren, and hopefully they'll read some of my books at some point. Grandchildren might do. That actually work is about play, it's about creativity, it's about fun. It's not about slog, or it doesn't have to be about slog. It can be about slog. It can be about nose to the grindstone, but it can be about something else. And so when I look at my family, none of my family were resource points for where I am now. All of them were working class, nose to the grindstone, unhappy. As all the ones that I've met were kind of like that. Some were more happier perhaps than others, but I didn't have anyone that was really on their path, on track, going, yeah, this is what I'm doing. So I think what I am now is a resource point for other people, but also for family. My grandkids will look at me, and actually I think I've helped my children as well in where they've gone. I've encouraged them to follow their hearts, even though where their journeys led was never where I'd want to go, but I've encouraged them, go there. If that's what you want to do, just do it. Whereas if I was still in the corporate world, I don't think I could really say that with all my heart. Just follow your heart, because I wouldn't have followed my heart. So if a parent says follow your heart, but they're not following theirs, the kids kind of pick up on that, I think.